by the blood of our people are your lands kept safe.
I see in your eyes the same fear that will take the heart of me.
So do all who live to see such times.
By all that you hold dear, this good earth.
There's some good in this world, and it's worth fighting.
Welcome back, everyone. I know we've kind of beaten this idea to death, but I just wanted to jump on it one more time because I came across this article. It had some good ideas, had some not so good ideas, so I wanted to quickly touch on it. And yeah, so basically, it kind of talks about this idea that okay, so first, Tolkien doesn't have a ton of women to write a very compelling story on. That's at least from my own reading of it. Like, I personally wouldn't be interested in seeing an entire show dedicated to most of the women that Tolkien writes. And you can disagree with that. Maybe they would be good. I'm just saying that if I were to be pitching a show and I had to pick and choose some women to write about, I don't think there's a massive list from Tolkien. That being said, there are some. They list some here, and I can even think of a few more that I might add to it. But I did want to just kind of highlight this and say that I do agree that if the notes from Amazon, when this idea was pitched, if the notes were, we want the lead to be female, I do agree with this article that Galadriel is way too safe a bet and way too easy to screw up. And that's partly because of with Peter Jackson, the mystery, the tone of Galadriel in that film and in those films, I call it one film, but in those films, it is really hard to top that. The amount of power that is behind those eyes when they flick open like they do, you know what I'm talking about. You've seen the movies. The intensity there, that's really hard to actually show, and that's why in The Hobbit I think she's just not as good. I know we see some great CGI fighting in The Hobbit, but to me, having the character be surrounded by this air of mystique of power, that when you start to break that down and when you show the backstory, and I've said this multiple times, it's why I'm not a big fan of the new spin-off Game of Thrones shows. You ruin, not only does your show it's lackluster, but you actually ruin, if it's canon, you ruin the idea in the original. And this is one that I've debated about with Star Wars as well, where the new movies kind of undo and harm the original trilogy. And I argue that subconsciously or consciously, in my case, the people who are able to watch both the original, say, trilogy of Star Wars or the original trilogy of Lord of the Rings, and then watch the new trilogy of Star Wars or this new Rings of Power and reconcile the two, what they're actually doing is separating them and saying they're not the same. They're not even, they don't remotely connect to each other. And I just think, I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine. I just don't think that we should have to. And the way you avoid it is you allow that character to exist, but still maintain this secrecy of their power, of their history. Um, I that's why I also don't think a great idea for a show would be like a Gandalf backstory. I, to me, the character will start to see the flaw. I mean, you need flaws. That's the thing. You need these flaws. You need them to be beat, and then we start to see, oh, maybe they're not that powerful being that we trusted and loved from the earlier work. And we now see the flaws when we watch that. And so that's why I have completely separated the Rings of Power from the original trilogy. They're not in the same universe. They're in alternate timelines, alternate dimensions, whatever, what have you. They're not even. I don't even think Rings of Power is in Middle Earth. That's when I watch it. I'm watching a kind of silly Dungeons and Dragons esque story, and that's all it is. Because that Galadriel there, there's a lot of growth to live up to what Peter Jackson was able to do with the character. And I just don't see it. I honestly, at this point, the mistakes are so egregious that I don't see how she can undo what she's already done in season 1 and come back and be able to wash all that away and repent for it and be stronger for it. I just don't get it, and I don't see her learning from some of these mistakes. In fact, I don't even know if the show is gonna. I mean, the show didn't acknowledge her mistakes in season 1 so far, and some of the more egregious mistakes happen early on in the show, and then she's kind of praised for them later on. So that's just happened now. We that's part of it. Now she might own up to the last mistake we saw of her, which was bringing Sauron into work on the rings. But that I don't really know. I think she won't even get a slap on the wrist. It'll kind of just be like, we were all deceived. So I don't even think that will be a learning experience for her. And so I just don't see it happening. So to me, they're different. They're just different things. And that's how I actively do that when I watch these now. And it works for me. I can now watch the original trilogy and have a blast. In fact, I was watching Two Towers just the other day. Just wanted to throw it on, get some feel-good vibes going. And yeah, it's great. But then when I go to watch Rings of Power, and in fact, we're going to do a rewatch of Rings of Power, maybe in the fall, just to kind of see if it's after, once you let it breathe a little bit, does it come around? And, when I'm watching that, I'm watching just a fun fantasy show that's not serious. Now, I get it if you don't like it. There are people that I've been talking to who are not huge into Lord of the Rings. They had a good time with it. And honestly, if you watch this show, we did too. But at the end of the day, I'm watching something completely different. And it sometimes takes me a minute. Like, people will ask me about some of the background to these characters, to the lore, how they relate to the original trilogy, and I have to kind of take a moment and realize, oh yeah, this is called, Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power. These characters are supposed to be those characters, and it takes me a little bit to come back to that, because I've completely disassociated it. It's a different thing. It's just a fun little fantasy thing, and I'm just watching characters kind of be silly a little bit. So anyway, here's the few of them that they've mentioned: Idril, Heleth, and Eowyn. Obviously, people would love to see an Eowyn one. I honestly think you could even do one. I know what I'm about to say. I mean, I wish I had a partner here to do some pushback. I don't think they would, actually. I think they'd agree with me on this one. But Arwen, from the films, this is where I need to put a caveat. The Arwen from the books, it would be mostly speculative, but I kind of wouldn't mind. And honestly, you can hate on this if you want. I'd actually love to hear some of your opinions on this, because I know a lot of the watchers of the original trilogy. Some of you have a problem with the way that they've depicted Arwen and how she kind of stole a role away from another character. But that's happened, right? So the films we have, the original trilogy we have, seeing a bit of backstory with Arwen, both prior to the Fellowship arriving and after they leave, and her going through her process of dealing with all of her emotions, it would not be action packed. I grant you, it would be a lot more of an emotional, almost a psychological story, and also dealing with the displeasure from her father, dealing with this idea of going against what her people should be doing, or ought to be doing, and kind of pushing back against the grain, and ultimately being a force that will be instrumental in a butterfly effect way to saving the day. And if you don't know what I mean, I mean it's been out for a long time now, so I guess spoilers, but it's her, and this is in the films. This is in the films. I grant you. So if that's something that's off the table for you, hey, I understand why. I get it. You want to be true to the books. Have at it. I'm just saying, people do have these questions around Arwen when they're watching the films, and I think the fact that her choosing the love of her life over her father's wishes and what people keep telling her to do, that's a universal lesson that I think every generation has their own kind of version of that in media. The rebel, not without a cause, because she actually has a cause, and it's in doing that forces her father's hand to remake the sword that will go on to bring forth the army of the dead. And so, in a butterfly effect way, she has a massive role to play in being able to defeat Sauron. So, yeah, that's, I think, would be an interesting idea for a show as well. It would not have action, I grant you. It would be a lot more dialogue heavy, and maybe some political intrigue amongst the elves. Who knows? But honestly, that's kind of the best part of early Game of Thrones. So that's sort of where my mind went, trying to capture that magic, because it's not just about the action. People forget that. It's about the characters and the emotions that they make you feel, and the intrigue and all that. So I think that would work. But yeah, let us know down in the comments below, what are other females from the world of Tolkien, from Middle Earth, that you think would be a good either movie or TV show. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say, and maybe we can talk about it.
I regret to announce this is the end. I bid you all a very fond farewell.